it seemed that the time was right, especially when I made the transition from clinical practice to academic medicine. I had a little more time. I had a little more free time. The idea for this book had been knocking around since the time of my own miscarriage. And I finally, pulled it out of the drawer and decided that I was going to move forward with writing the book that I had always hoped somebody else would have written my entire, clinical career.
Today we're chatting with author Cori Baill about her book, Why Mommy is Crying, a children's book to explain pregnancy loss to a young child. Hi, Cori.
Hi, Deb.
How are you?
Really good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being on. I love talking to anybody who's written anything, basically. I love talking about writing. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Well, as I've told you, I'm an OBGYN. I've been in practice for over 30 years. And about 5 years ago, I transitioned to our local medical school, the University of Central Florida College of Medicine. And I'm now teaching medical students in the first years of their education.
Awesome. So your book is Why Mommy is Crying, correct? I get the phrasing right. I always want to say it differently.
Why
is mommy crying? I always want to rearrange the word choice. And it's about miscarriage, or you're explaining miscarriage to young children, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So what was the path you took to creating it? I mean, how did it all start?
Early in my career, I had young children. I had a 3 and a 1-year-old, and I personally experienced a miscarriage.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process of looking for resources, not just for myself, but to help explain what happened to my children who were aware that there was a sadness, but didn't know the cause of it, I looked for this book. I looked for a children's picture book that would help make the miscarriage understandable in context, not just of the family, but sort of the larger universe. Right. And there was nothing. I mean, nothing. And I would check in once in a while looking for this book, and there was still nothing. There's been a recent trend, I think, in children's writing to address difficult topics. There have been some really great books about, when a grandparent dies, things like moving, even abuse, but really still nothing about miscarriage. Maybe some very religious specific books, or Our Angels in Heaven kind of stuff, but nothing that I thought was more general. So I have always enjoyed writing. I've done some short story writing. I'm interested in the whole field of narrative medicine and using, journaling as a way to help students, medical students especially, process the experiences that they're having, some of which are very first time, very intense, like the cadaver lab, the first time they lose a baby, those kinds of things. And so it seemed that the time was right, especially when I made the transition from clinical practice to academic medicine. I had a little more time. I had a little more free time. The idea for this book had been knocking around since the time of my own miscarriage. And I finally, pulled it out of the drawer and decided that I was going to move forward with writing the book that I had always hoped somebody else would have written my entire, clinical career.
Yeah, I can understand, kids that age, they're kind of in that weird spot where they can understand that there's something bad has happened and everybody's very sad about something, but they also don't really have maybe the mental capacity yet to understand exactly what has happened.
I think children really do understand emotions. If anything, their job is to sort of modulate their emotions and their understanding of emotions, but they know what love is. They know what grief is. Right. They get it. And they need to they need, and I think that they appreciate someone explaining it to them in terms they can understand, but they don't have any problem understanding that there's, that the emotion is there. That's not
right. Yeah. Kids get emotion. That's for sure. My kids definitely know if mommy's having a bad day without me even saying anything.
Yeah, they do.
So, while you were writing the book, what's one thing now looking back on it, I guess, now what's one thing you wish you'd known before you started and jumped in and wrote the book?
I was very surprised. I mean, I knew writing was a business. I knew, if I had been a celebrity, I would have, found a publisher a lot easier. I knew that I was writing a niche book that wasn't going to be like a seasonal or holiday.
Right. It's not the pout fish.
Right. But I didn't realize how children's publishing, and this may be true for adult publishing for all I know, but there is a Christian, what in this country, the religious fiction market is considered Christian literature, and then conventional everything else literature or books, and how deep that divide was, because I did not want to write a book that was pigeonholed as being specific to one religion. I wanted it to be non-denominational, but I also know that the concept of a God, caring for the spirit of someone, is a concept that children will find a great deal of comfort in from the child's point of view, regardless of the religious beliefs of the parents.
Right.
But me, that was not a line that I did not realize how hard it would be to not be pigeonholed. And I might have done the manuscript a little bit differently had I understood that a little bit better. But I'm really happy with how it turned out, and maybe I wouldn't have. But if I had known ahead of time, it might have made a difference.
Okay. So when you actually sat down to start writing it, what did your writing routine look like? Like, how did you structure that time, and how did you shoehorn it into your day?
I think every writer who is not an established writer and struggles with this, and finding time as a full-time physician, as a full-time mother, as somebody who's managing a household, it is very hard to find time for anything. But I really, I had written the original story 30 plus years ago, and then I pulled it out at various times to revise it. But finding the hours of the day, you have to give something else up. I mean, maybe I didn't exercise and go to the gym as much as I should have, or the dog got a shorter walk, and
right.
The kid picked up 40 minutes late. I don't know. I mean, yeah, they got take out for dinner. You find it hours here.
I feel like you're just talking about my life right now.
You're younger than me, but I know your life. Yes, I was there.
We are definitely eating a lot more takeout than we used to.
Yeah.
It's just like, I'm working, and and you look at the clock, and it's suddenly like 5 o'clock, and you're like, oh my God, I haven't made anything for dinner. What do you want from DoorDash?
Right. You have DoorDash. I had the rotisserie chicken at the supermarket. That was
yes.
And a bag of string beans.
So did anyone help you get started along the way?
I have a friend in town named Joni Oken, who is the author of an independently published but very successful book called To Hold the Throne, which is historical fiction about the last Maccabean prince.
Ooh, and sounds interesting.
It is. It's a very good book. I recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
Joni
I love my historical fiction.
Yeah. It's sort of a red tent kind of book. I would recommend it. She did a great job. And when I was telling Joni sort of my frustrations about things like, I wanted control in children's book writing. And I've known this forever. If you're the author and not the author illustrator, then traditional publishers want to pick the illustrator. And I wanted control. I had a very clear vision of what I wanted the protagonist to look like, of what I wanted the book to look like, what type of artist I wanted. And I wanted control over that. And Joni said, look, you're going to have trouble with this book anyway, because there's not, it is hard to find a traditional publisher who wants to publish a niche book about children's grief if you don't already have a big track record in writing. And you may want to go the independent route. And she said, I'll help you. I mean, I will help you. I'm not going to be your publisher, but I will help you. I've done it. And I know where you find the artists. I know what your choices are of publishers, and you can go the independent route.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you had that in your corner.
Yeah, as it turns out, I ended up going a little bit different route with hybrid publishing, which I turned out pretty happy with. But Joni was a lot of help, and it was through her advice and hand-holding that I first learned about Ingram Sparks, and I first learned about Amazon self-publishing, and I first learned about how you go about finding the people to help you put the book together. So I really appreciate Joni, and she was a good source of advice.
Speaking of the illustrations, where did you eventually find the illustrator?
The Society for Children's Writers and Book Illustrators, SCWBI, they're a great organization. Lots and lots of resources, but one of the things they also have is artist galleries and portfolios. And there's also a couple of independent sites to look at. I must have looked at something like 300 or 400 portfolios, maybe even more, to find. I wanted somebody who had a sense of whimsy, but who was very accessible. I didn't want it to look too cartoonish. I wanted the emotion of the child to be reflected by the stuffed animal he carries around for visual interest, and also reflected by the moon that's in the window. And so they had to be able to really express emotion and be accessible and have that sense of fun. And I found Heather Bell through the SCWBI website and the artist portfolios there. And she was such a joy to work with. She's much younger illustrator at the beginning of her career. She had another book called Mac and Cheese about these cute little pink hamsters. that was out. That was wonderful. And she got the book, and she contributed a great deal to the book. I'm very grateful to her.
That's awesome. I expect you to say something like Fiverr or something. That's where most people seem to go these days. So I'm surprised you didn't use something like that.
I think I was there too. I mean, I think I did a couple of sites Joni pointed me to. We spent a lunch or two when people still went out to lunch and had waiters. Nobody wore masks. Where we looked over the laptop and went through portfolios. I narrowed it down to like 4 choices, and I think one said, well, I can get to you in about a year and a half. And one never answered me. And one I didn't realize, to my shame, didn't really recognize the name as a big award-winning children's illustrator who wanted, I don't know, some outrageous amount, like a
more than you could
really
afford.
luxury car or a small house kind of payment. And then there was Heather, and it was just perfect.
That's awesome. That's so nice to hear when something comes together that nicely. Like it feels like everything, especially if you're doing like the self-publishing route, it feels like everything is just kind of a fight to move forward to the next step. And that's always nice to hear when something just kind of like, comes together.
Well, I certainly felt that way. And it has been, every step of the way working with Heather has been a pleasure. And there are times when I've said, well, now I have to, I don't know anything about bleeds, and I don't know anything about, I know what to do, she really knew her job, all the stuff that I never knew and didn't know. And it was just great.
That's awesome. So I guess while you were working on the book, I don't want to necessarily say writing the book, since we're talking about the entire journey of your book. We're talking about writing and figuring out the illustrations and figuring out the publishing and figuring out the distribution and marketing. How do you balance life and work and authorship?
Well, I mean, everyone's always trying to figure that out, right? Especially because this is
it's mainly why the question's there. Nobody knows the answer to that one.
Right. So the other thing, though, is that I had a very clear idea of how I was going to market this book and what I was going to do with it once I had it in my hands. I mean, that part I thought was really easy. It was a no-brainer to me. Oh, I'll go to the grief organizations. I'll go to Compassionate Friends. I'll go to the Starlight Foundation. They'll be interested in this book. They'll put it on their websites, and that has happened. But I also thought, and I'll go to the professional organizations. I'll show up at the American College of Nurse Midwives or the American College of OBGYN, and I'll have my little booth, and I'll show everybody what I've done, and people will take it back into their practices and have it the way I wish I had it as a physician. But then COVID happened.
COVID messing everything up.
Remember that? And so this book was actually published January of 2019 is when I got the book in my hands.
I remember January 2019. That was the last time we went to school.
In 2020. I think January 2020.
Okay.
COVID has completely wrecked my sense of time. January 2021 is when this book got in my hands. January 2021.
Okay.
That's was in my hands.
I think COVID's wrecked my sense of time too. Like I'll just agree with anything anybody says. That's when COVID started. Like, yes, it started in 1782. I agree with that.
Once I found a publisher, and they were pretty quick, I have to say. I mean, I don't remember exactly how many months it was, but it wasn't a terrible long amount of time because I had this book ready. This book was ready. They didn't have to do anything. I had a cover, I had all the graphics. It had been copy edited to death. I mean, it was done. I actually had another publisher. I had a publisher briefly, locally. And it fell through. And I so dreaded, because I spent a year trying to place this with a traditional publisher, maybe even more than a year, and could not find one. And when somebody finally said, "Oh, okay, we'll do it," it was a very small publishing house, and he said, usually what happens is somebody wants to publish a memoir for their family, and we run off 60 copies of the book, and that's that. They pay us, we're done. But we also will represent and market and publish maybe 2 or 3 titles a year, and we'd like to do your book. But then he sent me a contract that I didn't understand. It was like the weirdest contract, and I had a lot of questions. I mean, a lot of questions.
Understandably, yes.
My friend Joni, who wrote To Hold the Throne, was a lawyer.
Joni to the rescue again.
Hey, Joni to the rescue again. She was so great. So she looked at the contract. She said, "This contract is really weird." And I said to him, "You sent me a contract, but it seems that I'm having a little trouble understanding it." He goes, "Oh, I just cut this down from a bigger contract that I usually had. I'm trying to simplify things." And I said, "Well, it really doesn't talk about the, what you're going to do to promote the book at all." And anyway, the long and the short of it is he decided it was a great book, but that I was being too difficult because I was asking too many questions. And so I really just felt like, okay, maybe I had decided that I didn't want to self-publish in the sense that I didn't want a pile of books that I was then licking the envelopes and addressing to send out to people. And I wanted some professional help. And I don't remember. I think it was a sort of a friend of a friend who was in New York publishing. I was given an email address, and I wrote to her and I said, I'm not asking you to publish this book, but I need some advice. And I sent her a PDF. All the artwork was done then. We had a mock-up that was pretty close to what the book does look like. And she wrote me back, and she said, I'm going to tell you, I'm a very rare thing in New York publishing. I'm an optimist. And I think you should need to stick with this. This is a great book. I want to see it get published. Have you thought about hybrid publishing? And I was like, what's that?
Yeah, I don't think most people know about hybrid publishing.
Hybrid publishing, I think, actually can mean a lot of different things, but she specifically referred me to Greenleaf Books, which is one of the very profitable, very successful hybrid publishers out of Austin. They're out of Austin, Texas. And River Grove Books is their print on demand division, what this book was done under. But she mentioned Greenleaf Books, and she said, you might want to just talk to them. So I called them. I called Greenleaf Book. They had a phone number on their website, a contact us number. And I was sort of at my wit's end. And I said, look, I've just been dumped by my publisher for asking too many questions, and I'm over it. I want a decision on this book within 2 weeks. And if you don't mind me asking questions, just tell me now, and you don't even have to read the book. I mean, I was not
right.
I was not at my professional best, right? But I just had happened, right?
Right. So, everybody has an end.
Right. And they said, we love our writers to ask questions. There's no question you can't ask us. We're really happy to help you. We'll give you a decision in 10 days if that's soon enough. and we're sorry you've had this horrible experience.
That sounds like an awesome.
Right. I was just absolutely hooked. And and I thought, the other shoe's gonna fall, they're gonna nickel and dime me with that. But they never were anything other than professional. I mean, they looked at the book, it's an a la carte system. Nobody's gonna give you a what do they call it when they pay you up front for the book? A retainer. No one's gonna what's the word in publishing for?
You asked me, and my brain's gonna just blank on me. But yes, the check, the forward check they give you to basically buy the rights to your book.
Right. So nobody's gonna send me a check.
I'm gonna think of this in like 5 minutes and just blurt it out.
Right. And that actually I was expected to pay for some of the printing costs and publish, so they really make their money not on the book, but on getting the book to press. You're contributing to their costs of getting the book to press. And I thought, they're just going to nickel and dime me to death. But they didn't. They really didn't. I wanted an influencer package, and I wanted to get the book out into the hands of these organizations, the grief organizations, but also some of the professional organizations. They put together an influencer package for me. They didn't charge me. They charge you a little bit to get the ISBN numbers and the barcodes and all that set up. But they make sure that it's placed on Amazon, that it's placed on all the book lists where it's
that sounds like a nice service.
They put it out on. I'm trying to remember. I should have prepared this better. They put it out on where you put the preview books so that people could look at it and give me feedback just as it was first launched. So I had the benefit of that before it went. Before it was up on Amazon very much. And it was sort of an a la carte menu. Like I didn't really want a big media, I guess, where they contact all the news agencies and stuff, because I didn't think anybody would look at this book unless they had an interest in children's grief. And so I didn't want that. So that was off the table. And then they had this service where they pay a little more and they enter a few contests. And I said, I'll just enter what I want to enter myself. But some of them require the publisher to enter the book.
Mm-hmm.
And they did that without charging me, for those few that there were two that they had to present the book, and they just did that, and they submitted it to Library Works, which is like 80,000 librarians.
Nice.
They submitted the book to them, and that wasn't part of the services, as somebody knew somebody, and it was actually the March 2021 Children's Book of the Month for that organization.
Not bad.
Yeah. So they did, and they really held my hand through the whole I really did not have to worry about the bleeds and the page setups and all the things you look at. It's very intimidating to me. It's not what I know how to do. I had taken some online courses. I still felt like I cared too much about the book to not want it to look professional. And they did a very professional job. And they ordered the books, and I got my box. I think their service included, the first 40 books or something. And then I ordered some more. I wanted more for Heather and I to have. But all the way through, all of it was done professionally. I still have some contact with them here and there. They had some experience with children's books. Actually, it turns out, after all that gruff talk at the beginning, turns out they turned 95% of the children's books that are submitted to them. I had no idea.
So you being a bull just kind of got you through that defense.
Right. Because I thought, hybrid publishing meant you pay, they play. There wasn't any discretion. They said, oh, no. I didn't know this until I talked to my production team the first time.
Right.
We turned down 95% of the projects we get. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Anybody with that first phone call on this phone call, please just forget you ever knew. Anyway, so I've been very happy with Greenleaf. They've done a good job. They set the price of the book in anticipation of what they think the royalties, what I wanted, so that I have a shot at making back what I've invested in the book. And it turns out they didn't understand that the print size I wanted was not one that was available on Amazon. It was only available through the Ingram Spark. And that created this problem. The first royalty check was so low and so much lower than what they told me to anticipate. And I thought, okay, here it is. The shoe is dropped.
Right.
And they said, oh, our mistake. We didn't realize that you weren't going to be able to publish with both Ingram and Amazon because they don't have this 8.5 by 10 long. And so we will absorb the difference, and we will pay you what we originally told you.
Oh, that was nice. They didn't have to do that.
No, they did not. And we kind of raised the price of the book at that point to make it
to compensate a little bit
on its own over time. But that first quarter or two, they made up the difference without because they felt that it was their mistake. And so I will tell you that if you do decide to go the hybrid publishing route, you'll be happy with them. I think they said that they're not interested in one book. They want a relationship with their writers. And I said, I may be a one of, and they said, that's fine. We know other writers. It's okay.
Right.
We want to be a reputable and
here you're doing them service on a podcast, telling all the listeners who happen to be writers about a publishing company.
Well, I have to say I had a really positive experience. I'm very grateful to the New York. Actually, she's not a publisher. She reps books, but I mean, Sendek had been one of her customers, and before he passed away, I mean, she said, "Honey, you can't afford me. It's 60,000, and maybe I can get you on Oprah, but you can't afford me." I'm like, okay. Here I am with you, Jeff. That's better.
Right. How are you handling your marketing? Are they helping you with marketing, or have you taken that on? Because I know that's something that a lot of self-publishers, that's why they shy away from regular publishing, because they expect the publishers to do the marketing for the book, and most of the publishers are like, no, you're a no name, we don't know you, we're not going to do marketing for you.
I think whether you do, and this is, I guess, goes back to that question of what I didn't know. I always thought that one of the reasons a traditional publisher would be better was because they would take care of them, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people think that.
Right. They do not. You're going to have to, if you are not interested in marketing your book, then you probably should write it for your friends and family, which is a reasonable.
Yeah, you're not going to make money if you don't want to market it.
But keep your day job. Exactly. And I mean, I'll be happy if I ever break even on this book, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. But that's because I wrote it, you know, I do have a day job that, thank God, is fairly well paying. And I really wanted to write this book to fill a niche that was patient care. I mean, that's what drove me. But you do have to market your own book. And with Greenleaf, they will. I mean, you can purchase a la carte more marketing. I wanted that influencer list. I wanted to, which was my entree to many of the organizations which subsequently have picked up my book and is recommended to parents, and that they helped me to do that. But if I ever go back to them and say, look, I'm not being very successful on my own, could you start marketing my book more aggressively? They will do it, but it's a fee for service. I mean, I would have to make that calculation in my head that I can make back. But you know, there's a lot of resources. Again, SCWBI for $25. They have an October book stop, and you know, where publishers know to come look at the new crop of books every year. There are a lot of inexpensive resources out there to help you with marketing, but you do have to find them. And then there are people like you, Deb, who have these podcasts that is reaching a whole other audience for Why Is Mommy Crying, explaining early pregnancy.
Right.
I think there are a lot of resources out there if you look, but you have to market. And I will go to the medical conventions eventually once we're
back to normal. I don't know. Will we ever be back to normal?
This is a real, a pandemic. Who'd have known? All right.
So what advice would you give someone?
Why is Mommy in lockdown? Will be
Why is Mommy crying? Because she's in lockdown with you guys.
Why is Mommy in a mask and crying?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so what advice would you give someone who wants to write a children's book that's just starting out, that has that idea? What advice would you give them?
You know, I think that writers think that more writing is better. If you are interested in writing a children's picture book, you know, I don't think the whole book has 400 words in it. And you have to pare your language way down.
I can see that.
And I think most of it, after I wrote this book, most of what I had to do was rewrite it and cut it down by 3/4, you know, to get it. And you have to be able to rely on the illustrations and to have the visual interest, both for the reader and the child. And I think most people who start out writing children's picture books just don't understand how sparse the language really is.
That's a good tip. I know from experience, like, I don't think I even put it together until you said the words out loud, but reading kids to my book, I'm not even sure they're entirely listening to my voice. I think they're mostly focusing on the pictures in the book.
And they do. I mean, there are some children's picture books that have no language. There's the fish in the hat. And
right.
I mean, there are no words. It's all visual, and they look at all the details. And that's one of the reasons why I, you know, from having young children, I knew I wanted, you know, the little face of the little stuffed animal and the little, you know, and the face of the moon in the window to be reflecting the child's emotions. And then Heather had this absolutely brilliant idea of, because the book talks about sometimes the baby only makes it part of the way to a family before turning around to going back to God. God chooses the baby to go to a family. And I really
how else do you explain miscarriage? I mean, there's a baby that started. Right.
It's non-denominational. There's no iconology. There's no angels or heaven gates or anything. But Heather came up with this brilliant idea of having the baby flying around in the sky in a little red airplane with a propeller. And it's just so cute.
That's super cute.
Yeah, we had the mobile over the child's bed with some airplanes, and she just took off on that idea. And so flying around on the pages is this little airplane with a little baby pilot. It's so cute. But I know kids will just laser focus on that.
I definitely know my kids would laser focus on that airplane. And they would stop listening to my words and be like, look, Mom, the airplane's over here now.
Yeah.
That is 100% what they would do.
Good.
So, what are the best resources? I mean, other than your very excellent publisher, what are some of the best resources that helped you along the way?
SCWBI, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. Join your local regional chapter. They moved their meetings online, but right before the pandemic hit, I'd gone to a regional meeting. They embrace self-publishers, hybrid publishers, traditional publishers. People have been very generous. The authors, the name authors who ran the workshops. Oh Lord, I cannot believe I can't pull up her name. But the Night Construction Site author. They're just so generous. They'll read you. I walked around with like black and white copies of my dummy, and showed it to people. They also will put you with, there's a critique sessions with established editors and publishers and agents. No one was interested in me because I'm I have one book under my wing. I'm not sure I'll ever write another children's book, but so agents weren't particularly interested in me. But if you're interested in a career as a children's book writer and you're not a member of that organization, you are really, I think, depriving yourself of a great resource. People are so generous, so welcoming. The regional meeting I went to was, I thought, oh, Chuck being a doctor, I want to be with these guys. Yeah, this is so much worse. I'm going to be quiet. I've got to go. Heck with this, They're a great group and they're very generous, very generous.
Yeah, it makes me want to be a children's author, even though I would be terrible at it. But that story makes me want to be a children's author.
Why is Mommy chucking her day job? No.
So, being this your first time book and possibly, I guess, only book, although you made it sound like maybe you'd write something other than children's books there for a second.
Well, I've done some short stories and I've done some professional publication, journal articles and I've written quite a few guest editorials for our local paper here in Orlando. The Sentinel. I've been a guest editor for them for various topics, mostly related to women's health. Most recently, I wrote about the pandemic, about my rights as a physician to remain healthy. You get your vaccine.
So what I was going for with that is, since it was your first time writing a children's book, what was the biggest failure you experienced, and why do you think that happened?
I thought if I was just persistent enough and sent that cover letter out enough about this book and why I was writing it, and
you mean to the traditional publishers? Right,
and what an incredible need there was, traditional publishers. SCBWI has a book called The Big Book, and in there, every agent, every small press, every big press, everybody you could ever think of. And, whenever I wasn't doing something else, I was like sending out the cover letter and the book. And actually over the time that I was doing this sort of things were moving from to all online. So I was on the laptop doing it. But I had the book open and I was just going through the list and sending it out. And okay, if I do this enough, if I send out enough, if I'm persistent enough, I've done other things that were pretty selective. I thought, okay, somebody will pick up this book, and nobody. was interested in this book. And yet I knew it was a good book and a good story. I mean, I don't mean to sound like I don't have a lot of competition either, but I mean, I knew there was a need. I knew there was a need. And I thought that I had been conscientious enough in filling that need that it would, anyway, make a long story short, nobody wanted it. I had to get over it. And even though I got positive feedback from publishers, like, I love the book. I've had a miscarriage. I wish I had had this book. Not right for our house. It's not right. It wasn't right for traditional publishing.
Right.
I think because of that, there wasn't anything else to compare it to. So nobody could say, oh, yeah, we, Erdman did this book and, they made, $30,000 on it in the first, there was just no track record.
Right.
You couldn't get past the bean counter. So
there was no data for them to look at and figure out if it was going to be a good fit or not.
So, I was disappointed, and I had to retool, and I did, thank God, and the book is done, and yes, I had to invest my own money, and yes, it was not cheap to do it, but I'm happy that it's out in the world and can help people, because miscarriage can be a very lonely time in a young woman's life, and a very sad time in a family. And there's not a lot of resources. Traditional religion hasn't caught up to the smaller family size and how precious every pregnancy is, and how devastating it can be to have a loss.
Yeah, miscarriage is, I don't know, to put it lightly, isolating. You feel very alone.
Yeah.
There's no one to talk to. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to listen to you.
And you're supposed to get on with it. You're young,
exactly.
You're healthy,
yep.
As you want. I never got pregnant again after my miscarriage, and I had wanted a larger family. So I will say that there are some wonderful organizations out there now that many are fairly new. There's the Early Pregnancy Loss Association online. Starlight Foundation has done some really wonderful online programming around early pregnancy loss and term pregnancy loss, stillbirth loss.
Man, I wish I knew about those 6 years ago.
Friend has, and I think 6 years ago maybe there weren't quite as many organizations. Now there are Facebook groups, and that's a whole other thing, where a dinosaur like me to be on social media, but I have some help with that. I think that there are more resources, thankfully. So now I forget what the actual original question was that you had asked, but I hope I answered.
So I guess I'll just move on to the next question. What's the biggest challenge you have right now? Being an author, an author. I kind of want to say post-author. You have written, you have published. What is the biggest challenge in your life right now regarding the book?
I think anybody would have the same answer. It's COVID and marketing at the time. And you don't have traditional book signing. You don't have, there just aren't any of the traditional mechanisms out there for you to promote your book. I mean, somebody who had interviewed me or who I had done a blog for, I don't even remember what I did for that particular organization. I do whatever anybody asks because I want the book to be out in the world. But somebody emailed me and said, oh, we're having our annual fundraiser and we'd like to have your book to sell at our table. Where do we get 10 copies? I'm like, hallelujah, I'm in the mail this afternoon. Just pay printing costs and the shipping. I'll happy to do. And I went to a bookstore the other day because I needed, actually for Heather Bell's child, I wanted to get, I was sending her some books. I wanted to put something in the book for her child. And who was the first reader, child reader of the story, and was fascinated and loved the story. So totally loved. She should illustrate it. So whenever I send anything to Heather, I always put something in the box for her child. And
that's sweet.
So I stopped by this little bookstore that happened to be open and close to the post office, and the big independent bookstore in town said, "Oh, a local author, what a headache!"
Right.
As soon as possible. But I said, yeah, I hate to say this, but maybe, do you have any interest in local authors that wrote this children's book? And so I emailed they gave me the address of the owner. I emailed her and she said, oh, I'd love to have your book. I was so touched. So
that's so nice.
And some people have been incredibly generous. I mean, I've reached out to just random, like if you've written a traditional press article about miscarriage and breaking the science around miscarriage, you've gotten an email from me. And I wrote and said, oh, I'm undergoing chemo now for breast cancer, but I'd love to blog about your book. Just give me your Facebook and Twitter and whatever it is. Which of course I call Eve, who's my student friend who's helping me with all the Facebook. Could you give me this stuff that I'm supposed to know what it is? That's my handle. Anyway.
Bloggers speak a totally another language.
In the chemo chair, getting chemo and promoting my book on her website. I mean, this author.
That's amazing.
The people have been incredibly generous. Not everybody's like the local independent bookstore, which will go unnamed. but Spiral Circle took the book and so it's getting out there, but it's been so slow because of COVID. And I if anybody who works for Oprah is listening and you want to read this book, it would really be great on the book club.
Listen, if Oprah was in my audience, I wish I would know about it.
I'm sure she listens to you, Deb. I'm sure.
Maybe someone in her circle listens, and it might go up the circles.
It did get a very nice, readers 5-star book review. It also got a very nice book review from the Midwest Book Association. They featured it as. So it has been really well reviewed. There's I think 60 the last time I looked reviews on Amazon, and anybody in the audience who like to read and write about the book, feel free. But there's been it's pretty much a 5-star review all the way around every time it's been reviewed. It really makes me happy. So yeah,
that's awesome.
That's been really good. But just getting any book out in the world right now because of COVID, launching during COVID is a challenge. I don't care who you are.
Yes. So, marketing now is everybody's bane of existence, I think.
Right. And the time's going to come when, everybody's going to start meeting in person. Some of the medical meetings are hybrid meetings now. So, and I'll put a couple boxes of books in a car and drive over to wherever they're, let me put up a table.
You could send everybody like a licensed PDF copy of it. Like, hey, here's a preview of what I have.
Well, I actually have sent a review PDF out, sort of low resolution, but I have sent the review PDF out a lot. And I think I sent it to you at some point. Yes. So, that I do it. It's not licensed, but one of the things Greenleaf did, of course, was copyright the book, part of their process. So, I felt like, okay, what's somebody going to do? Publish my children's picture book with my pictures and my words?
Yes, and your name and everything on it, yeah.
Oh, good.
They'll publish it for you.
Have at it.
So, a final question about the book. Did I cover everything you wanted to talk about? Like, if you could step into my shoes, what would you have asked myself that I haven't done?
Oh, you've done a great job, Deb. I
want to cover my bases and make sure I didn't miss some obvious topic for I feel like I'm always missing something obvious.
I think writing a children's picture book, writing any book, people think of it as sort of a solitary task, but really without feedback from other people without it being workshopped, without all the context and contact that I had with all the other writers, and it would not be as good a book as it is. And you really do have to listen to what other people are going to give you as feedback, and you have, you have to embrace that part of the writing process, and it'll give you a much better book. And I've learned that over and over with this book and with other writing that I've done.
Yeah, I've heard it put that the famous, like, it takes a village to raise a child. I've heard it applied many times to writing in general, that it takes a village to produce a good piece of work.
It's really not. I mean, some of it's solitary, of course, but what all good writing is rewriting. You really do have to have feedback from other people to make the book accessible to everyone. And there are some things in here that in the first draft where friends, family, some people say, yeah, you really sure you want to say it that way? Probably the 20th time I heard it, I thought, okay, fine, that's got to go.
Maybe these 20 people have something or have figured something out that I just want to hear.
Right. The first half a dozen people, it's like, oh, that's their problem. What do they know?
When it gets to 24, though, that's the line.
Right. That's when I could finally say, oh, maybe I have a point. Damn it. Because your words get to be like your little babies. But if I had to add anything, and I know we're getting close to our end of our time, if not over, but I would say that it's the silence around miscarriage that needs to be broken. That so many women, of course, wait. They want to wait till they know everything's going to be all right. Most early pregnancy loss is a fairly common event. I've written a whole essay about what's the number, but somewhere around 1 in 4 pregnancies experience end in miscarriage. Sometimes even
that's an awful statistic.
It is, but it's it is an awful statistic. And many women are waiting till they're out of that first trimester, that they're through 12 weeks before they even tell anyone they're pregnant, and they're not really showing, and it becomes a very private thing. And then women have shame. Maybe I should have rested more. I shouldn't have yelled at my husband. I should have put my feet up. I shouldn't have been working full time. I mean, all the things that we can self-flagellate ourselves for.
If only my body produced more progesterone.
None of which, well, maybe the progesterone, none of which probably make a difference. It just, a book like this helps to end the silence. And if you don't know what to say to somebody who's had a miscarriage, a book like this can open that door and let someone know someone's carrying on the other side. I think because I'm a physician, people might have expected it was going to have a very scientific explanation, and it's not. It's meant to be an explanation that a child can understand and feel comforted by. And I think it succeeds in that. I think the people who have reviewed the book feels that it succeeds in that. And I hope it continues to give families who have known the sadness comfort. And I hope you found it comforting.
Thank you. I felt like the correct emotion was there. Like, I think if I had my own miscarriage before I had my other kid, my kids. So if I had them first, I feel like they would have understood that emotion. And because that's, obviously what the young mind is going to gear towards, is that emotion.
Well, I think at some point they may want to understand, they may ask, if,
I'm very open about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I still think a story like this can have a place in any family that's had a loss, regardless of what the chronology was.
So just before we end, I just want to put some things out there about miscarriage. Do you have any advice for someone who might be experiencing a pregnancy miscarriage now? Mostly, or be experiencing pregnancy loss, not exactly if you're experiencing a miscarriage, please go see your doctor. But for anyone who might be experiencing pregnancy loss.
I think that there are resources out there. You may need to look a little bit. The back of the book lists some resources like Star Legacy Foundation and Compassionate Friends. There's if you're worried about your children, there's the National Alliance for Grieving Children. The American Academy of Pediatrics has some resources also. But as I said, there's a lot of Facebook groups now and really great. The Early Pregnancy Loss Association's a great group of people. You can find a community. You can find people to share your feelings with who aren't going to tell you to just get on with things. And you know, you're young, you're healthy, you'll have as many as you want. I tell when I was in practice and I'd have a patient have a miscarriage, I would tell them, look, you have to develop a little bit of selective deafness, and people may say things that you find unhelpful, and you just have to not hear it. What you have to hear is, I'm sorry, I care. Can I do the laundry? and just not hear the very odd things that sometimes people say, thinking that they're comforting when really they're not. Yeah.
I'm probably one of those people accidentally. I never know what to say to someone who's going through some kind of emotional state. I always say somehow the wrong thing. So any listener, I apologize if I've offended you in my life.
I'm sure that I think the important thing is to remember that people do care and they're trying to say the right thing, and to not fall prey to that tendency we have to blame ourselves, to find fault with ourselves, to think that somehow it was all our fault, and you know, just that reach out to others. And there is comfort out there.
And it's okay to grieve. You don't have to just move on to the next one. It's okay to stop and grieve and cry and be upset. That is okay.
It very much is okay.
Now, where can people find your book?
Why is Mommy Crying? Explaining Early Pregnancy Loss to Young Children is available through Amazon. It should be able to be ordered wherever children's books you usually would like to purchase your children's books. They should be able to access it. And you can also get it through, Greenleaf Book Group Publishing. But if you just Google it, it'll pop up.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, Deb. I really enjoyed it, and I so appreciate what you're doing with your podcast for writers.
Well, thank you. So join me next Wednesday when I'm going to talk to Eric Erickson about story structure. Until then, keep reading, keep writing, and go do what you do best. You got this. If you've experienced or are experiencing a miscarriage and need to talk to somebody, backline 1-888-493-0092 is an excellent free hotline that provides non-judgmental support to women facing a range of pregnancy outcomes. If talking to someone is too raw right now, and I understand that, Unspoken Grief is a website where families experiencing prenatal loss can tell their stories. Read and Write Podcast is edited and produced by Deborah Zebarth. Theme music was written and performed by Jay Hunger, and audio effects were created by Red Octopus and Black River Phonogram. Show notes and previous episodes can be found at readandwritepodcast.com. Special thanks to Cori Baill and all the subscribers who make this podcast possible. You guys are awesome.